Hi everyone. This week we are going to start working towards understanding the next generation science standards, which are what the Louisiana state standards are coming from. And so we will be working a lot in the Louisiana science standards. So I wanted to take a minute to show you where you find the Louisiana science standards and then additionally how to start reading them. And we will go into this in even more depth next week when I actually define the next generation science standards and where they are in the Louisiana science standards. So to find your Louisiana science standards, what you need to do is you go into Louisiana Believes. And then once you go to louisianabelieves.com, you can then look up the K-12 Louisiana Student Standards for Science. When you do that, you'll download it. And then what you'll receive is a folder, and in that folder you will see that you have every single grade's science standards. So grade 1 through 8th, and then for high school you have chemistry, earth science, environmental, life, physical science, physics, and shifts in science. So I'm going to pull up the 3rd grade science standard just so you can see that. And then when you do that, you can see that there's a PDF. And in this PDF, you will see that there are a bunch of them. And they are labeled based on the grade, the type of science. So in this case, it's physical science. And then this is the standard 2-1. So if we're talking about a Louisiana state standard, in your discussion boards or when we are having a face-to-face discussion, you would be talking about Louisiana State Standard 3-PS2-1, motion and stability, forces and interaction. When you do open up your standards for your grade, you will see that there's a performance expectation, a clarification statement, and then there are the three parts or three dimensions of learning that need to happen in this standard. So, for example, in this standard, the performance expectation is to plan and conduct an investigation to provide evidence of the effects of balanced and unbalanced forces on the motion of an object. Now, as a 3rd grade elementary school teacher who may not have taken physical science for a long time, you might be thinking, what does that really mean? And so this is where the clarification statement comes in, and they give you examples. So they say examples could include an unbalanced force on one side of an object that can make it start moving, or balanced forces pushing on an object from opposite sides will not produce any motion at all. Investigation include one variable at a time, and that could be the number, the size, or direction of the forces. And so that sounds great, right? Like, okay, so I have this idea that I am supposed to, in 3rd grade, have my students plan and conduct an investigation where they need to be looking at either unbalanced forces, where an object is experiencing force from only one side, but also maybe they are experiencing balanced forces from both sides and why that object is not moving. But then there's another step to it. So you could start getting really creative with what you want to teach, but you still have to follow the 3 dimensions of learning. And so what the folks in Louisiana's school boards want you to do is they want you to focus on your students learning how to plan and carry out an investigation to learn this particular concept. So you want your students to plan and conduct an investigation together to produce data to serve as the basis for evidence using fair tests in which the variables are controlled and the number of trials are considered. So now you really need to think about what you want to do with your students, and you have to provide them the opportunity to actually plan out how they are going to investigate a phenomenon. You could use toy cars, you could use a balance. There's all sorts of things that we could do here, and we'll talk more about that in class. And then they also want you to make sure that in this lesson, you cover this disciplinary core idea, which is that each force acts on one particular object and has both strength and a direction. An object at rest typically has multiple forces acting on it, but they add up to give 0 net forces. So you really need to think about the laws of motion, and that is what they want you to focus on as well. And then the cross-cutting concept that they want you to hit in your lesson is that cause and effect relationships are routinely identified, tested, and used to explain change. So you want your students to be able to, by the end of this lesson or by the end of the unit where you're going over this concept, that your students can actually explain the cause and effect on that object. What makes that object move? What makes that object stay in place? So when you are doing your assignments in our class that involve the Louisiana state standards, please make sure that you download the appropriate grade level for what you're teaching. And make sure that you read them, in which if you need clarification, you read the clarification statement, and whatever lesson you are providing meets these three major parts: the science and engineering practice, disciplinary core idea, and the cross-cutting concept, while meeting the performance expectation. If you have any questions about how to read the Louisiana state standards, please email me. We can set up a Zoom, and I hope that this was helpful for you all. Take care and stay well.